welcome back to another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. And this week we are recording from Barbados again, but specifically from Regis Co-working Center in Barbados. Regis is located in One Welches, St. Thomas, and it's a really great space if you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a digital nomad, and you just need an office space for a day. It's an absolutely lovely location, and I'm really happy to be here. And joining me this week is Melanie Moeller, and Melanie is this technology innovation lead at Sky Labs. Melanie is here to talk to us today about Web 3.0 and how that is impacting on the way we work, particularly with a focus on the decentralization. Now I'm going to hand it over to Mel because she can describe what she does much better than I can. Mel is what I like to describe as a bit of a tech genius. So there's no one that can explain. No way I can explain what she does better than she can. So over to you, Mel, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an absolute privilege and joy to be on your podcast, Rochelle. Thank you very much for the flowers. So really pleased to be here and can't wait to chat about Web3.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So tell us a bit more, just before we get into our topic, tell us a bit more about what you do. What is a technology innovation lead?
That's a very good question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. When I first was asked to build out a technology innovation function as part of Sky's Innovation Lab 3 years ago, I was in the privileged position to choose a title, and that was what I came up with. So anyway, let me tell you a bit about the work that I do. So what I do focuses really on two things. So the first one is strategic foresight. As part of that, myself and the team that I lead, we scan and identify emerging technology trends and understand how they might drive value for Sky or even pose threats to Sky as a business in the future. And then the second thing we do is we bring innovation to life. And that means that I have designed an iterative process that uses rapid experimentation and customer insight to build and test prototypes. So the proof of concepts that we run could be anything from using machine learning models that help predict broadband outages to using blockchain and digital wallets for identity management and authentication. So it's really broad. And what I enjoy the most about my job is that I'm not just a tech geek, although you did call me a tech genius, but I actually bring a broader lens. So we, of course, look at the technologies and what they can enable, but we also dive deep into the human needs and strategic opportunities for Sky. And one thing I'm super interested in is technology-enabled business models. So I hope that gives you a bit of a summary.
Yep, and now you see why you said genius. There's no way I could have explained that better than you just did. And it really gives me an understanding of what you do. Because I just think, when you said technology innovation lead, I'm thinking of behavior processes, which you are, but as you've mentioned, there is a human side to it as well in terms of how it impacts work. So thank you for that. But tell us a bit, let's go into what you do, because what you do, you mentioned blockchain, and you know, Web 3.0 has been on the lips of most businesses, most companies, and media for a while now, especially as it relates to its impact on the work. So what is Web 3.0 and why should leaders care about it?
Sure. So I would define Web 3.0 as the next iteration of the internet. So it is essentially a decentralized web ecosystem based on the blockchain, which allows for complete transparency of transactions. So in other words, an attempt, I would say personally, to fix our current iteration of the internet, which is often called Web 2.0. Because within Web 2.0, as we all know, networks have become very siloed, and there's lots of issues around accounts and our personal data. For example, I have a minimum of probably 200 accounts and different passwords, which does my head in, and I'm sure that's the same for you. And as we also are all aware, if we don't pay for a digital product, we do pay with our data, and we have all experienced that with platforms like Facebook, now Meta, and similar.
Yeah, I like that point that you raised about the data, because I know this is becoming a real concern for companies. What do you think companies should be able to, what should they be looking at given this change, given this new iteration? And how would it affect the way that they manage?
So do you mean how companies should manage talent, or why leaders should care about this?
Yeah, why should leaders, so I'll edit a bit of this out. So I'll say the question again. So you make a really good point about the data, especially making our data available on the internet rather than paying costs. And this, of course, has certain advantages for companies as well. But what does this mean for companies in terms of how they manage their people?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I have to just scroll down to the right question. You might have edit this out because we jumped a bit. How they manage their people.
So that's the third question.
What does this mean for companies and the way they manage? Okay, I'm there. Yeah. So in terms of what this means for companies, one thing to mention is that in December last year, Forbes predicted that Web 3.0 will change the way people think about work, and it will have implications on the overall employment landscape. And so as a futurologist, I'm constantly obviously tracking key shifts. And there are two key shifts that I'm seeing which will affect companies, and especially the way they approach talent management. So the first one is decentralization. So work will become a lot more decentralized. So that is one of the core principles, obviously, of Web 3.0. So what could that look like? With regards to the decentralized work model, a framework that I really like is by John Boudreau, who is a well-known thought leader and future of work expert, who is a professor at the University of Southern California. So his framework proposes the deconstruction of worker capabilities and matching those to deconstructed jobs. So he basically challenges the concept of the monolithic worker and proposes the deconstruction of the employee into granular skills and capabilities that can be used in a more fluid way. So a concrete example is that during the pandemic, he worked with a healthcare provider that experienced a shortage of nurses. So what they did was that they deconstructed the nursing job and realized that certain tasks, such as scheduling or taking patients' temperature, could be performed by other staff, such as hospital administrators. And such a model could be coordinated via a flexible talent workplace. So this really gives you a flavor of the new types of work arrangements that we might be seeing. The second shift that I've been observing is a shift away from a work to earn model towards a model where people earn income in non-traditional ways. We already see blockchain-based so-called play to earn models in the gaming space. So that's one alternative model. And the other one is the learn to earn model. So that's probably even more relevant to the corporate context. A Udemy study recently revealed that 80% of people would be more engaged in their work if they had the ability to learn new skills. Wouldn't that be exciting? I mean, I love learning. So where the opportunity cost of not working in order to take classes would have been prohibitive for a lot of people, learn to earn lets them prioritize learning. So this would not just mean an investment in employees' personal development and obviously professional development, but also an investment in future growth, and would also help organizations to solve the talent retention problem. And also, in addition, very obviously, it might have a positive impact on mental health. So these are the two key shifts. In terms of, back to your question, the way companies could pivot to better manage talent in a decentralized world, there are 5 pieces of advice that I would like to give. So first of all, I would say companies should provide opportunities to learn, and as well as structures that allow to translate learning and contributions into rewards. Secondly, I would advise organizations to review corporate governance structures and maybe have a look at the model of so-called DAOs, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Having a look at the model of a DAO, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, and provides an alternative framework where employees would have greater participation and more ownership. The third point is I would advise companies to rethink hierarchies. So is there a model where cooperation could be based on a more loose entity? I would also say start running agile experiments and test how work might flow to talent. This also would enable leaders to combine humans and automation rather than making humans redundant because of it. And then my final point is, or my final recommendation, provide autonomy and flexibility through remote and hybrid working.
Wow, just the wealth of knowledge you just provided, Melanie. I think you're like the new MVP of this podcast. That was amazing. And it's so it's so relevant, and you're so right. There's such a conversation right now that's going on around moving from career-based and hierarchical-based organizations towards skills-based organizations. So where rather than having, someone described it to me once, a good colleague actually, a previous guest, Barry Matthews, he described it once as, let's say you have an architect in an organization, and an architect is good at designing, and what he does, similar to what you said with the nurse, but then he also have a wealth of other skills. He also has a wealth of other skills that can be used in different departments that might be lacking in those skills. And you're very much right. If we restructure organizations in a way that skills that are spread out within, that are currently siloed within departments, can be better used in other departments. One, we create more meaningful jobs, we create more interesting work for a lot of people. So you make such good points there. And another great point, I'll ask you about this because you mentioned the remote work and the hybrid work. What do you think about the fact that freelancers have been described as the early disruptors of work in this sense? Because we were talking about the decentralization of work, and you have freelancers who work from job to job, from skill to skill. So what do you think about that with regards to what you spoke about?
So I think, first of all, obviously, that has the gig economy essentially has provided freelancers with a lot more autonomy. And I think personally, or my utopian vision is that we actually, with this decentralized model, will see a shift towards the next revolution of work that is underpinned, or hopefully will be underpinned, by Web3 principles, bringing about a new freelance economy and revolution. So let's have a look at the gig economy, and then I'll talk about the new Web3 economy. So in the gig economy, as mentioned, learning was linear. So most people earned an hourly wage or are being paid essentially per gig. In Web3, earning is non-linear because freelancers will own part of the marketplace. So they will have a significant amount of ownership. Additionally, freelancers working on Web3 projects can earn a combination of stable coins and tokens. So here we are thinking also decentralized rewards, we are thinking cryptocurrencies, and those tokens can offer uncapped upside, but also represent ownership, because the more tokens an employee essentially, owns, the more ownership and participation they have. And all of these are being equally distributed. So we won't see, what you currently see in a hierarchy where there's favoritism, where people write up the pecking order, get the most rewards. So there's also way more incentives, and the ecosystem itself is being shared. So that's really the shift of moving towards a marketplace that is collaboratively owned.
Yeah, it's almost like the organization or network of organizations as you described, become marketplaces rather than these, I don't know, archaic structures where we're trying to hold on to power at the top. So I think it's really good when we're talking about that decentralization of work, because now you have people spread right across the organization that feel as an equal part of the organization, or feel like they can have an equal stake in the organization as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we are going to see completely new work operating models and organizational structures, hopefully, that are more internet native, where we see a greater amount of transparency, maybe powered by decentralized ledger technologies and so on. So hopefully, and that's what I often, describe or think of when I think of Web3, because it has the potential to transform the workplace into a community of value where everyone gets to participate, earn, and own.
I love that. I love that idea. Everyone becomes actually able to participate, but also capturing the value of the person as well. So I imagine that this has a lot of implications, not just for the way we manage, but for leaders as well. These persons that would have been at the head of the organization, who we depend on for guidance in terms of the working process, or even in terms of future careers. How should leaders be trying to reorient in order to leverage Web 3.0? What should they be doing now if they really want to leverage a lot of the benefits that you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So my first piece of advice here would be definitely try to connect with experts and thought leaders in the space. So we see a lot of exciting startups emerging in the Web3 and metaverse space. We also see industry leaders launching platforms, and especially when we look at VR workplace tools. So you might have heard that Meta is bringing out the new Meta Quest Pro, and I was actually chatting to someone from Meta the other day about it, and that's really merging the real world and the virtual world, and it will offer new workplace tools so that we can, in the virtual space, be more collaborative. It will also help with facial expressions and reading other people's, or let's say in the virtual space, obviously avatars' emotions. And I think we are seeing a lot of innovation around that. And my advice would be for leaders to try it out, have a play, try Horizon Workrooms, see what it can do for your teams, and especially when you are thinking hybrid teams or cross-national teams. So try out these tools and then think about what use cases there might be in your organization. Secondly, I would say invest in startups and R&D, which is super important. So we see a number of large organizations, for example, having ventures funds, setting up R&D labs. So just a quick example, Orange obviously set up a number of 5G labs, and they're really pushing forward when it comes to connectivity innovation. Many companies also run accelerator programs or incubators. So Sky is, as you might know, part of Comcast now and NBC Universal. Comcast has an accelerator program, and as part of that, we work very closely with metaverse startups, with Web3 startups, and I have personally learned an awful amount from bright talent and the technologies they have come up with, as well as the consumer experiences. And then thirdly, I would say use frameworks that help you in a structured way plan and map out the future. So one framework that I absolutely love is scenario planning, because it helps leaders map long-term and short-term scenarios. So that helps leaders think in a structured way about optimistic and catastrophic scenarios, and obviously how to mitigate those catastrophic scenarios. So these also help to prioritize near-term action and long-term action. So off the back of those scenarios, then organizations could first of all maybe assess their own capabilities using a SWOT analysis, and then come up with value hypotheses that can be tested in an iterative way. And that leads me on to my last point, which is test, learn, and measure, and then go again. So use all of that insight and all of these your learnings to run structured experiments to test out your assumptions. And the more experiments you can run, the better. So these could be, for example, around understanding how DAO mechanisms could benefit your organizations. And that's actually pretty easy to do so. Leaders don't have to set up a whole new legal entity, but can just run micro experiments around concepts such as learn to earn, as we discussed, using tokens as rewards or something similar. They could run experiments around collective voting to reassess how decision-making is being done. They could also look at decentralizing their operating models, introducing skills marketplaces, and so on. And then obviously, as you roll out these initiatives and run your experiments, measure as you go along, talk to your employees, understand, does this drive greater work satisfaction? Look at whether this increases performance, and then monitor whether talent attrition has gone down. So that's just a few things that I think leaders can do now.
Wow, you say a few things, that's a basket full of things, which is that is absolutely brilliant. And you're so right. And I think one of the good things that's coming out of that is that it's highlighting the different skills that leaders need today now. I think we're really moving away from that paternalistic, autocratic, great man at the top of the organization concept to more of a leaders having key skills of curiosity, leaders being able to adapt to certain circumstances, and most importantly, willingness to experiment. Because what you're talking about with getting used to different working models, this is something that people find very hard to accept. People are very resistant to change. And with this context where they might not necessarily understand all of the technology involved or what it might lead to, I really like the idea of just being very iterative with the process, have that, and you mentioned the scenario planning as well, looking at the long term and the short term, and then trying to plan and iterate and review and go again. So I think there's so much that you said there that is so relevant for what we're seeing is happening now, but also for what's coming in the future.
I think a really good point you made there is also that a decentralized model and using decentralized technologies has the potential to drive greater inclusivity, diversity, and equity. So there's this one brilliant example of a female racing driver who I follow quite closely. That's mainly because she's awesome and she's German. So am I.
I think I know who you mean. Yeah.
Her name is Laura Marie Geisler. So you might have heard of her. And I just absolutely love what she did. So she launched the first NFT funded racing team, testing out an alternative to traditional sponsorship models. And when I read about it, I learned that traditional models are quite difficult for female racing drivers to enter and get sponsorship because the whole sponsoring space is very male dominated. Yeah. So this example, I think, shows how these new technologies can really drive equality and greater equity. So is there maybe an opportunity to empower women, people of color? Because as you said, the traditional patriarchal model is that, we essentially have men at the top of most organizations.
Yeah, it's almost like resetting the balance a bit and leveling the playing field. And it's amazing. We don't really, when we think about technology, we think about these sort of practical and logistical changes, but just the wider societal changes that Web 3.0 can have. I think that's a really important point that you highlighted. So thank you so much, Mel. You have shared so much with us. Organizations have a lot of work to do. And I mean, you've given them so many starting points, so many frameworks. So I know this episode, like many of our other episodes, especially this is my new favorite episode.
Wow. That's a big one.
Valuable. I'm a nerd. I love this sort of new knowledge. It's exciting to hear about all the new things happening in remote work technology and workspace in general. So just before we wrap up, do you want to tell us what is your most memorable work or remote work story?
Sure. I guess my most memorable remote work experience was earlier this year when I was working from a ski resort in Chamonix, France. And I literally closed my laptop, and 20 minutes later, I was going down the slopes and was just surrounded by a white cloud of snow. So I just love the flexibility remote working offers. In terms of funniest experience, there have been a few. For example, when I was working right next to a pool in Portugal, and almost tossed my laptop into the pool. So the learning is never try to swim with your laptop. It does not work. I leave you with that.
Now, the funny thing is I can share this with our audience because I've known Mel for quite a while now. And I remember we had something similar, if you remember, in Iceland when we went to visit Iceland, and your 360-degree camera fell into the Blue Lagoon.
It did. I have a track record of tossing devices into water, and they don't merge well. It actually ended up breaking, which was probably not due to the water, but the salt in the lagoon. So yeah, just don't try that. Yeah, I remember thinking, I would have loved to see those pictures. That would have been amazing. But well. They were lost forever, unfortunately. Lost forever. Well, we have the memories. We'll have to draw them out. But thank you so much, Mel, for sharing with us. And I know you've been doing a lot more speaking recently. You've been doing some really amazing things. So I'm going to continue to follow you and look out for everything you do. And if our audiences want to follow you, where can they find you? Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. So my full name is Melanie Moeller. Just follow me on LinkedIn, connect, chat to me. If you have any further questions, just hit me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to follow up with you. Likewise, I enjoy following your work, Rochelle. Absolutely amazing. Love your podcast. So I will continue to tune in and I hope your audience will as well. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audiences for tuning in, as Mel said, for another week. And this is going to be our season finale episode. So thank you for showing up for another brilliant season. We've had some really interesting guests this season, some really valuable knowledge that continues to push the boundaries of work and encourages us to prepare for those new frontiers. So thank you for showing up. Thank you to all of our guests who joined us. Thank you, Mel, for being our season finale guest. And take care to our audiences. And we will see you in season 4. Take care for now. Bye. Absolute pleasure. Bye, everyone.